Welcome to Chewing the Cud.
Welcome to Chewing the Cud. This is a weekly live stream where we get together on Sunday nights and sit down at the kitchen table with you guys and discuss things related and unrelated to regenerative agriculture. Usually we'll start off with some brief introductions as to who we are and what the heck we're talking about, and then we'll go into like a topic that we've chosen for the week, and this one's going to be, the topic is choosing an enterprise for your farm, and then after that we're going to open it up to Q&A, and we'll answer any questions we got during that first chunk, and then from there on out it's up to you guys to divert the conversation and ask questions and comments, and they can be related to what we're talking about, it can be not related at all, it's just whatever you guys want it to be. So yeah, we'll start with some intros.
All right, my name's Isaac. This is Ben. We are interns here at Green Pastures Farm. We're working for Greg Judy, him and his wife Jan own Green Pastures Farm. We run 370 head of South Pole cattle, about 160 head of St. Croix sire hair sheep. We do shiitake mushrooms. We sell bale rollers, fiberglass rods for fence posts. We host grazing schools, farm tours. We do a lot here on the farm, and Ben and I are here to learn how it works and how to make a living doing what we love. So it's a good life.
Yeah.
That pretty much sums up what we're doing here.
Yep. How we doing on attendees? Oh, we're already cranking. All right.
Up to 14.
Okay, so today's topic is choosing. We're really excited about this one because I think this is something that I don't know if it's not talked about a lot, but I don't think it's stressed a lot. Because usually when people are talking about, in the space, people who are experts and successful at whatever they're doing are talking about their enterprises, their operations, like what's working for them, and it's helping out people to varying degrees all over the country, and that's like, Greg and his counterparts and stuff like that. I think it helps a lot of people out, but I think that something that's not necessarily talked about a ton is like how the heck you even choose like what enterprise you want to be using on your farm, and specifically like we'll start with like we'll call it like your mothership for this discussion, or the mothership, yeah, where like that enterprise is going to be the absolute core of your operation. That's what's going to be the focus, and then everything outside of that mothership is just going to be like little side enterprises. They can be decently large, but like really we're focusing this first part of the discussion on figuring out how to decide on that core enterprise.
So let's give some examples. For example, Greg's enterprise, his core is the cattle. That's like what we spend the most time on. That's what we're the most focused on. Some complementary enterprises would be like the sheep. The sheep they're higher up there on the
complementary scale
on the list, but they're more of a, the cattle takes priority, and the sheep get done when we have time to get done, and we try to manage correctly, but it's not as much a focus as like it is on the cattle.
Yep.
And so that's like for Greg's situation. I know for like most of like Joel Salatin, his main, like what he built his farm around was the chickens, the pastured broilers. And he fit everything else around to complement them. Or that's like what he started with. That's what his business was founded off of. And maybe that might not be to say that they're the most profitable in the long run, but it's like how he got it going, and it's what his main focus is.
It's the core enterprise, and then there's always some evolving and tweaking as you learn and grow. But so how do you even begin to start thinking about like what I'm going to choose to be an enterprise in my farm? And so I think the first most important piece is you got to tie it back to the land. And for people who watched last week's live stream and have looked at some of the clips on YouTube from last week's live stream, it was all about land and the importance of land to your business and in the agriculture industry, like how important being focused on land in the specific ecosystem that you're a part of. And so tying back to the land is the first big key with deciding what your core enterprise is going to be. And by that, you need to first understand whatever animal or breed of animal or or thing, like if you're doing mushrooms or something like that, like what the environmental aspects and requirements are of that breed, of that specific animal, of that thing that you're trying to become a core focus. So, for example, with South Poles, right? Like what would the South Pole cattle breed do you need as far as like ideal conditions? What are their like ideal temperature ranges? Do they like really dry, humid, really dry environments, or really humid environments?
Really warm environments, really
cold environments.
Fescue Belt.
Yeah.
Not the Fescue Belt.
What kind of forage do they excel on? Is it more like a Corriente where they can eat like wood chips and be totally okay, or are they like a high performance sports car where you can only put like perfectly pristine ideal forage in them for them to operate correctly? So those are like the things you need to understand about everything, like what sheep breeds are you using if you're doing sheep, like that kind of thing, under really drilling down and understanding the land requirements, the environmental requirements of that specific enterprise would be a good first step. And then the flip side of that is you need to understand what, like we talked about last week, you need to understand the natural history and the actual like land use history of the piece of property that you're on. Because you're not going to be able to make that connection between the land and the enterprise if you don't know anything about the land and if you don't know anything about the enterprise. So education on both of those pieces is paramount in the beginning.
For example, you probably shouldn't be running elephants and giraffes in Oklahoma.
Yeah, probably not a good idea.
Sorry.
Or like or yaks or anything like that.
Things like that. Like that's a perfect example. You don't like say you live like somewhere like in the southern states or where it gets really hot and you have this vision in your head. Oh, I'm gonna run yaks
or Highland cattle.
Because it's more it's more like primitive and fitting into nature better.
And they're hardy.
Yeah, and they're super hardy. And you get down there in the Oklahoma or the Texas summers or whatever, and the yaks have this huge hair coat on them, and they just they're way too hot. They're not going to perform well. They're meant for a colder climate. Than like you trying to force this enterprise into it's like a square peg into a round hole. It's like it doesn't work. You need to understand that going into it. And make sure that the enterprise you're looking at getting into does fit your environment and your market. But that's a whole
other thing. But no, it's also an important piece when you're choosing an enterprise is to understand, is there a demand for it, and is the market like saturated with it? You know what I mean? Are there a million people raising pasture broilers around my area, and so me getting into it, there's not going to be a huge demand for it because the supply is really big? Or is it the fact that like nobody understands what a pasture broiler even is, and so nobody's going to want to spend $6 per pound on a chicken or whatever, because they can just go to the grocery store and buy one really cheap. It's like those kinds of things you got to be thinking about how you're going to be marketing that thing in your specific circles, in your business. And so all those things, understanding the land, understanding your markets, understanding the enterprise itself, like whatever that is, cattle, sheep, mushrooms, whatever,
market
gardens, chickens, pigs,
yaks,
goats, sheep smoked cheese, whatever it is, right? Bison. So that's, I would say, part A of choosing a mothership is understanding all that education and like background work on whatever you're thinking about. The other piece, which I think is equally, if not more important to this whole thing, is like, what are you specifically into? Like, what do you enjoy doing? What gets you up in the morning? Because regardless of what you choose, it's going to be work. It's going to be a lot of hard work. But if you enjoy whatever it is, if you really love cattle, if you really love sheep, if you really love chickens, goats, whatever it is, it's not going to feel like an arduous task. It's going to feel like, this is cool. Like, I get to put some like effort into this, and it's super rewarding because I really get to do what I love. And that'll definitely keep you going. So that's something you really got to like do some soul searching with and think about long and hard. Is this something that I'm truly passionate about? Because or
is it something I'm doing because I feel like I have to.
Or is it something I'm doing because somebody else in the space is doing it and it says that it's really successful, you know?
Right.
I think people get caught up in that hype a lot where, you know, I mean, we can pick on ourselves. Like we talk about South Pole cattle and sheep. And so people get, you know, all revved up about that. But are you getting revved up about that because it's from inside you, or is it because we get revved up about it? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it's a really important distinction to make.
Yeah. And it's like, and the same thing like for us, like maybe someday if we're working up in Saskatchewan, we're not going to be running South Pole cattle, even though we see the benefits and the advantages of South Pole in their environment. They're not going to perform well in Saskatchewan. And so something like maybe a Highlander or a Galloway or a yak. Yeah. Don't do belted Galloways. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
And so like being able to just get like we both love cattle.
Yeah.
We both really enjoy working with the cattle, and being like understanding your environment and being able to plug in cattle into your environment, whether it's like whatever breed you can be.
Yep.
Like that's an important part of it too.
Yep. But if you don't like them, if it doesn't get you up in the morning, I mean, your stuff's going to go wrong, and you're going to get into some serious binds and be putting out some serious fires, so to speak, over the course of your time in this industry. And so it just makes it a lot easier to deal with the headaches. What is someone says something funny?
I get revved up about whatever Greg says.
Yeah. But it's true though, because like it's not only Greg, but there's a lot of passionate people in this space because it's super cool and everybody's super into it. And it's great that it gets people revved up, but you got to really like think about like are you getting revved up because it's just sort of a contagious passion and you just enjoy watching that kind of stuff, or like do you really love it? You know, because and to be honest, maybe you have to try it to figure that out, but just understand that maybe you don't want to go whole hog into, no pun intended, maybe you don't want to go whole hog into something, you know, right off the bat, just assuming you're going to love it. So, that's part number one, is choosing that mothership. So to recap, tie it back to the land, understand the enterprise itself, understand the land itself, understand your markets, and the most important thing is understand yourself. And if you can put all those together and it's pointing you in a certain direction, just go for it. But the second piece to this whole thing is what we would call like nesting enterprises
or
complementary enterprises.
Interchangeable.
And like when do you make the decision to like branch out to sheep if you're doing cattle, for example? When do you start that process? Do you start it right in the beginning? Do you wait? You know, like what are the signs that you're ready to start something? Should you start something? Like these are something else in addition to whatever you're doing. So like that's the second piece to this whole conversation is those complementary nested enterprises.
And
they're important.
Yeah, with that, like digging into that, there's no perfect answer for your enterprise. Like as far as time to start or what to start, you know, what complements what you're doing. There's many enterprises that if you look far enough and you kind of like think about what you like to do and what would fit well with your farm. There's many things that'll tie in that like allows for people to like have unique farms. Like everybody it's kind of a cool thing because everybody that has a farm has the ability to then like create it's different, you know. Like Greg's got mushrooms and cattle and sheep, whereas like someone like Jordan Green has pigs and he still has cattle and he doesn't have sheep, but he has the chickens and so like stuff like that.
There's so many different ways to slice it up.
There's so many different ways.
And it's important, like one might say, you know, why wouldn't you just take like cattle, for example, and run with it and just make it as big as you possibly can and that be like your thing that you make a living off of. And like that's all well and good and you should try to like strive for that, but you become your business just becomes vulnerable if you only have one source of income, like on a very basic level. So it's a good idea at some point to start diversifying your income streams. And
don't put all your eggs in one basket. Yeah. No pun intended.
No, that was an intended pun for sure. But in all seriousness, it's important. It's an important discussion and a thing to understand is, when should you start thinking about that. And I think we would both agree that you really want to keep it as simple as possible in the beginning for a number of reasons. One, you need to know if you like it or not. But then two, like you were saying, everything that you do is going to go wrong at some point.
The more you do, everything's going to go wrong. And so the more you do, the more is going to go wrong. It's just like part of farming. Like things mess up, you have to put out the fires. And so the more the more enterprises you're starting at the beginning, the more load you have on yourself, which some people can take it, and that's like specific to each person. But
you just gotta understand that you're gonna be juggling a lot of stuff and putting out a lot of fires at one point. And if you're good with that, then go for it, because there is a benefit of having that additional income and having that diversified revenue streams. But I think there's a lot of people that bite off more than they can chew right in the beginning, where they're super gung-ho about it. They're like, I'm going to do cattle, pigs, chickens, sheep, guard dogs, shiitake mushrooms, fence posts, farm tours, farm consults, conferences, interns, like right out of the beginning. Maybe not that extreme, but to some degree like that. And then they just burn out in 6 months, and it becomes an absolute nightmare for them and their family and friends. So, really, like, I would say an ideal scenario, and I understand that this doesn't work for everybody, because some people, like, they need a certain level of income for them to make it work. So they're gung-ho to start other stuff to try to build that income stream. But if you could grow the business as you grow in your experience and your comfort level with this kind of stuff, you're going to be so much better off. So if you can start it super simple, start with one thing that is your like mothership, and just let that thing rock and understand all the ins and outs and nuances of it. When you really feel like you've mastered that and you're on top of the game, and obviously you learn every day, but once you sort of feel like I got this under control, even in the worst times I feel like I'm under control, then you can start thinking about, all right, how can I start incorporating other things and attach them onto this central enterprise. And so that's what we mean by like complementary. And like, what would be like I think a good example of like what that complement actually is. You know what I mean? Like,
what do you mean?
Like as in with sheep and cattle, for example. Yeah. Like there's a really cool complementary. There are really cool complementary like enterprises because they're both grazers. Yeah. Like they both essentially require the same thing. So if you're set up to manage for cattle, you're set up, you're used to the paddock divisions, you're used to like understanding how to slice up, like an area of land according to the nutrient requirements for that given animal. Like all that kind of stuff is the same for sheep. It's just slightly different.
And if you can make it work and you can run the sheep in with the cattle, it just adds like so much more benefits to it, because you've got one flurd that you're moving at the same time. Another good example of a complementary enterprise is guard dogs. To sheep. Because you need guard dogs, especially if you're at least if you're in this area or in most areas in the country that have predators of sheep like coyotes or bobcats or whatever. You need the guard dogs to protect the sheep. Well, then if you already have to have guard dogs, why not have a breeding pair and have pups and whelp on pasture and sell those and to make more income. It doesn't take any more land, because guard dogs don't need grass. They just need kibble. It doesn't take any more infrastructure, because they're going to be in with the sheep. It just it'll take a little more time probably to get used to it, work out the kinks. It's a learning curve, just like anything, but
that's what makes it exciting.
It's something like easy like that you can plug in to a sheep enterprise, and you have extra income coming off the same land. So.
And I think that the sort of closing note with that, as well as the closing note with your mothership, is the fact that you need to be interested in it. You need to like doing it, even with those complementary enterprises. Like there has to be some level of enjoyment there. You can't just be doing it to diversify income streams, because you're going to start resenting it, and then and then it just starts to drag down whatever enjoyment you had when you were just, whatever, running sheep, or you were just running cattle, or you were just doing goats or whatever. You know what I mean? Just always be measuring with yourself. Is this something that I really want to do? Because
and it doesn't have to be something that you're crazy about, but it has to be something that you find a little bit of enjoyment at least from.
The like effort and the headache that it causes, because everything's is gonna require effort and headache to a different degree. The effort and headache that it causes has to be worth the, not only like the like, monetary gain that you get out of that, but also like the fulfillment that like you get out of that. At least in my opinion.
I think so too.
Because some people might argue with me and say, hey, if it's super lucrative, like I'll do anything, but I'm not about that.
There's more to life than money.
Yeah.
I mean, not that money isn't important,
and you have to make money in order to
do what you love.
Yeah, you gotta make money.
It's part of it.
But like money being the end all be all, or like the end goal, should never be. It should be. This is getting into a totally different topic, but it should be happiness, not monetary gain. Anyway, I think that about covers it. As far as, I don't know how long we've been going for. You can't tell on there.
No, you can't.
But
about
a half hour.
Yeah, about half hour.
So I think that sort of covers it for how to choose an enterprise. Things sort of where our heads are at. I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts on it.
We can jump into
Oh
man, we got a lot.
We got a lot of comments and questions, so we'll start just rattling those off and just keep throwing them in there, because we'll catch up eventually. Now it's up to you guys to make this stream what it is today.
YouTube channel looks great. Thank you.
Thank you.
This guy's been doing all the work for it.
It's all right. It's just putting it together. The live stream from last week, the full length episode, is not uploaded yet. I'm gonna do that tonight. It just takes a while for it to happen, and it wasn't going today, so it'll be up tomorrow though. I'll get that all loaded up tonight, and I'll post it tomorrow.
Glass and Farms did the ship emojis for the mothership.
Yeah, the mothership.
Check out the land brittleness scale by Savory Institute.
Yeah, that's a good.
Yes,
it's a good thing. For people who aren't familiar, it's a measurement of moisture, as well as as in moisture throughout the year, but also distribution of that moisture throughout the year. So if you get 40 inches of rain, but you get it in 2 months of the whole year, you're gonna be pretty brittle.
More brittle
than if you had 40 inches of rain over the course of the entire year, which is like what we have here. You're a very non-brittle environment, and so it's just a more accurate measurement as opposed to just like total rainfall, as far as like what to sort of expect from a management perspective of like different areas. If you're people who are into that, you just pick up Alan Savory's Holistic Management. It's a dense read, but it's just chock full of information.
Where's the Fescue Belt? That's a good one.
So the Fescue Belt, when we refer to that, is anywhere in the United States where fescue grows, like primarily. When we say fescue, we're referring to Kentucky 31 tall fescue for the most part.
Basically from Missouri all the way to the parallel to the
Atlantic Ocean,
and then north up to like northern Indiana, southern Michigan, Pennsylvania probably has fescue still. Maybe up into like Wisconsin a little bit, and then south to I think Tennessee still has fescue.
You don't want to get any far. Yeah, Tennessee has fescue, but you don't want to get farther south than here. You don't want to go farther south than Arkansas or southern Arkansas.
Just like a parallel line.
And you can go a little bit farther west than Missouri, but not much.
No.
But that whole area we talk about is called the Fescue Belt, and the reason that it's important for us is just because Greg's management, our style of management here is heavily reliant on that grass,
especially in the wintertime.
And so the applicability of this model of a business in this grazing system is it's very adaptable to the Fescue Belt, because it's very similar. You're dealing with that same grass as the bulk of your of your operation, is like the lifeblood of your operation. If you start to go to places where there's not as much of it or none at all, things have got to like be run a little bit differently to compensate for that. So, yeah. And the reason why is just because of the fact that it's incredibly durable, incredibly hardy. Kentucky 31 fescue is. And in the wintertime, it stockpiles really well. It maintains its nutrient quality, and it'll stay green most of the winter, like under ice and snow, because it has a really like waxy cuticle, and then also like the toxic endophyte gives it some more like substantialness, like more hardiness, more like resistance to like freezing and brutal temperatures like that. But it doesn't do well in the heat. But it's really the winter management is what makes it so awesome, is the fact that you got something to graze in the wintertime.
And it builds a sod that keeps the cattle up when it's muddy.
Yep.
Like right now.
Right now, we went and moved the cattle tonight, and it was wet. We got like probably like 1.5 inches of rain, something like that, 2 days ago. And it was, I mean, the ground was partially frozen, so it just like flooded everything. But that sod is holding them up.
Keep it simple. Oh, crap. Just a second. Keep it simple to market. Marketing yak is going to be harder than Angus. That is true.
Yep.
You can only be so weird. Pastured poultry is weird. Pastured heritage black skin silkies are harder to market, especially in the beginning. What's the thing Joel Salton says? You can be a Buddhist and you can be a nudist, but a Buddhist nudist or nudist Buddhist is just way too much. That's kind of true.
I don't know about that.
Yeah. If you can market it, it's all about the like the work ethic.
Yeah, it's how you spin it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's like if you're super passionate about it, you'll figure out a way to make it work. But you got to be creative.
And willing to really put the work in and hit a lot of walls.
Yeah, and the ceiling of certain things is different, right? Like you can
only sell so much yak.
You can only sell so many yaks. Like, and the education barrier for something like that is just immense. Like there's so much consumer education that you have to do in order to get people on board with something like that. I wouldn't be shocked if you could do it though. Like I think there's a way you could market that where people would be into it, but like it's going to require a ton of effort compared to something that people are familiar with, like lamb, or I mean lamb's not a good example because there's some people who aren't familiar with lamb, like beef or chicken or pork. People are super familiar with that, and so it doesn't require a ton of consumer education as to like what the heck they're dealing with. But anyway,
we got a good one.
Let's hear it.
If we start with custom grazing cattle, is there a good way to begin growing our own herd within that enterprise?
We were talking about that the other day.
Yeah.
About like what a custom grazing operation would look like.
You just, when you're custom grazing, there's a tendency to, when you start in the spring and you graze through the summer and they take them out in the fall, you're not worried about saving stockpile because you don't have to take them through the winter. If that's the way you're maybe you are custom grazing through the winter, but if you're custom grazing just through the summer,
the growing season,
you can take it down a lot shorter in the fall. Whereas if you're trying to grow, if you have your own cattle in and you're grazing them together, you really want to be able to be stocked at the rate that you can have some winter stockpile going into the winter. So you're not just feeding your own cattle hay, 4 months out of the year. That's just going to become drudgery, and it's going to be, your cattle are not going to do well, or as well. They still will probably do fine, but yeah, I don't know that. Yeah. There's not a lot.
I think
that's what Greg did. Is he started? Yep. He was custom grazing.
So for people who aren't familiar with what custom grazing actually is, it's where you don't own the cattle, somebody else owns the cattle, and they're paying you usually on a monthly basis to graze their animals, to put weight on their animals, where they don't have to be managing it. They're just paying you for your management of their herd, essentially, or their group of steers or stockers or dry cows or whatever. And so the advantage of it is that the cash flow aspect with cattle is a bit of a problem usually, because it takes 2 years 3 years for them to give you a calf, which is like a return on your investment, or 2-3 years for them to be properly finished. They need to be about 2 years old. And so it's like a long time before you see any like liquidation of that asset at all. And so cash flow is a problem with cattle, but custom grazing is sort of a way where you can still run cattle, but you have a steady stream of income every month. You're being paid for that. So it's big, especially starting out, because cash flow is so important with a fledgling business.
If with custom grazing, the way you're able to, each month, if you're getting a payment for what you're, what the grazer that you're grazing for, or the owner that you're grazing for, if he's paying you every month, that's huge to have a check come. You have a check coming in the mail at the end of the month, then you're able to really kind of live off of what you're doing. And another aspect to it is the leasing land part of it too.
Yeah.
Is you won't own the cattle because you're custom grazing, and if you're doing it on leased land, you don't own the land, so you don't have to make like a land payment if you have a loan, or you don't have to pay taxes. You have to pay the rent, obviously, but there's a lot less risk involved.
But as back to the original question, as far as like starting your own enterprise in concert with your custom grazing, there's no real issue with that. It's just that you need to be managing. You can't just be managing for the custom grazed herd. Like, you have to be managing for your herd. Like, if you're wintering 50, 100 head or whatever, and you're custom grazing another 100 or another 75 or whatever over the course of the growing season, you've got to be watching your forage, like you were talking about, like for the sake of your animals. Like, you need to be managing it for your herd, and then the ancillary, or the sort of like add-on, is those custom grazed animals. And it's going to work out really well if you do it in the growing season, because that's when you actually need more animals to deal with that spring flush of grass and all that all that forage out there that's trying to go to seed. And then right when the grass stops growing, you shrink the herd down automatically, and you're good to go with a much manageable size through the winter. It also gives you experience. It's that same sort of thing where like it's not like there's still risk, obviously, because you're responsible for somebody else's animals.
Yeah.
But it's not like it's all of your skin in the game. Like it written in the contract can be, if there's a drought, like, you gotta take the animals off my farm within a certain period of time. Like in the custom grazing contract.
If something gets sick, the owner has to come in and pay for the shots. You don't have to pay for them.
So it's a way sort of like of gaining really good experience in like cattle skills without having a huge amount invested, like financially,
especially if you get some fun cattle in
there
too.
Especially if you got some interesting animals that you got to deal with, and then you build a lot of tools in your tool belt, put a lot of tools in your tool belt, and
gain a lot.
You gain a lot of experience, and it's a good way to cash flow the business when you're starting out. So it's a good idea. Just make sure that you got enough grass for your actual herd. That's what I would say.
We get an average rainfall of about 20 inches. What kind of grass would you recommend? Cool season or warm season?
20 inches is drier than it is here.
Yeah.
By a lot. It's like half as much rain.
Yeah. And where are you from? Also, what a big thing that we say is, graze what's growing in the road ditches. Graze what's already growing there and doing well.
When he says graze what's growing in the road ditches, he doesn't literally mean turn your mob out into the road ditch. He means like you could. I mean, but he means like go and look at the road ditch and see what's growing in the road ditch.
Yeah.
And that's what you want to, not that's what you want to be focusing on, because most of the time it's compacted soil and like whatever. But like,
that's something to start with.
Yeah.
And to start with.
Because that stuff's going to grow there regardless of what happens. So if you can graze what's growing in the road ditch, you're gonna be doing pretty well.
And chances are there's some warm seasons or some cool seasons in the road ditch. I don't know where 20 inches of rain. You're probably
somewhere drier.
California.
California. That's an
so would the pasture need more rest?
Yeah.
Probably. Yeah, for sure.
So the deal with rest and recovery and rainfall is basically like you don't really need to necessarily worry about the rainfall. You just have to worry about the forage. Like you need to monitor that paddock right at the start of your rotation, and just constantly be coming back to that paddock week after week and putting a ruler if you have to down into the grass and watching it and seeing if it's actually growing. Is it recovering? And you cannot come back to that original paddock until that paddock is fully recovered. And so if you don't get a lot of rain, the grass is going to grow slower, which means it's going to take you a lot longer. You need to take a lot longer to come all the way back around to that original paddock.
So you should be stocked so that you can shrink your paddock size down to be able to get that longer recovery period.
You got to match the recovery of the plants. It's like recovery of the plant is your recovery period. However long it takes for a plant to regrow and recover is how long your full rotation needs to be. At like a very basic level. That's what you need to be focusing on. In the desert, like we talked about in the last live stream, if you're somewhere like in Chihuahua, Mexico, for example, Jeffers Cattle Company, another shout out, they have like 365-day recovery periods. That's like a whole year. That's crazy.
Yeah, and we have like on average
60 days.
60 day. So we could get we can get 6 moves in the time that they can get single
6 full farm rotations
in the time that they can get 1 full rotation.
And it's just matching the recovery period.
Yeah.
So
you should go check those guys out. They're doing some cool stuff.
Yeah.
Holistic Management Handbook on Audible at 1.7 speed makes it way easier to get through.
To get through, but how much are you absorbing?
I've been through it 5 times that way.
Yeah. I think, but like actually having the book in front of you helps.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, at least for me, I wouldn't be able to keep track of like the sections of what he's
I'd
talking
like drift off and start thinking about it. All right. Keeling Farm. So well said, guys, on Enterprise. You guys are killing it tonight. Must be whatever Ben is sipping on.
This is chamomile tea for people who are wondering.
I'd be really interested if you could share about winter grazing management of the fields with the game of grass, Indian grass, etc. Alternative grasses that overwinter well for grazing. That's a good one. So with those warm seasons, the native warm seasons like the Indian grass, the big blue stem, and then along with the planted varieties like the gamma grass, in the wintertime, those have very little feed quality.
Almost none at all.
Yeah, they turn brown like as soon as there's a hard frost.
They just melt.
They just disappear. Our saving grace in the winter is fescue, Kentucky 31 fescue with the endophyte and everything. In the wintertime, when the fescue gets more cold on it, more snow, more frost, that endophyte level will drop.
Yeah.
But the thing, and we talked about this earlier, the fescue has a sod on it that can hold up our Greg's 1,000 to 1,200 pound cows, or not 1,200 pound, but 1,000 pound cows,
1,100
without pugging the pastures. It takes winter really well. It's pretty good feed quality. It's pretty good feed in the winter when the endophyte levels shrink a little bit.
But in the summertime, when it's hot as heck, 85, 90 degrees or whatever, fescue just turns brown.
Yep.
And it doesn't grow. Like it doesn't recover very well at all. It doesn't, like if you go through months of warm period, your fescue is barely growing. It'll recovering.
Still be there, but it just doesn't grow. It just kind of stays.
Which is what you were like when you were talking about those warm seasons. They just explode. Like they grow like you wouldn't believe. And so having a mix of those with your cool seasons, it's
an advantage.
You have to have it. Like
they
otherwise,
kind of like balance each other out.
Yep. And in the ecosystem itself, there should be both of those kinds of plants. It's not like you have to go out and be worried about drilling in big blue stem or whatever. Like you shouldn't really be thinking about that. You should be thinking about let me just make sure that I'm grazing properly, rotating, coming off of, making sure that stuff recovers properly, And as long as you do that consistently, you're going to make way for all that diversity to come in.
The spots where we have a lot of Indian grass are so, and I don't know if I'd recommend this, but Greg bought some hay, I don't know, a few years ago that was Indian grass, but it had been baled like way too mature.
Really mature.
And if you know anything about Indian grass, when it gets like the stalk, that stem on it, cattle won't eat it. It's way too stalky. It's just unpalatable.
It's almost like a tree.
And yeah, it's basically like a tree, and that's what he had baled. So
Yeah.
it had all the had seeds in it though, and he spread the hay. Since the cattle wouldn't eat it, he just used it to kind of cover up, pond dams that Johnny the dozer operator had just made, and on the back of those dams now is some of the best Indian grass
solid
stands we've
Indian
ever
grass.
seen. It's crazy.
It's insane. When it kicks, it's like 7 feet tall.
I've got a picture, and it's like I have the 4-wheeler here, and the gamma or the Indian grass is like 4 foot taller than the 4-wheeler. You can't even see over it. It was crazy.
So cool.
But yeah, so the thing about those native warm seasons is with the big blue or the Indian grass, even like switchgrass or little blue stem, the roots on those native warm seasons are usually 2 to 3 times larger or like deeper than the height of it. So if you think about that, 7 foot tall Indian grass, it's got 21 feet of roots in the ground, and when that's grazed off or trampled on the ground, a lot of those roots are burned up to then shoot, not burned up, but used to then shoot another stem up, and so that root mass becomes part of like the humus
in the soil,
and that's part of building soil. So like native warm seasons are super good at building soil.
Huge.
They just don't hold up in the winter, obviously.
So you just gotta have a mix.
Yep.
And there's a mix in nature, so just make sure you're not overgrazing. That's really the key.
We grew fescue in a loamy clay bottom in northeast central Texas, north and east of Dallas, 100 to 120 miles, and 20 miles south of the Red River in Oklahoma. So probably right there in the corner.
Yep.
Yeah, when we went on a trip into Oklahoma, on the east end of Oklahoma, kind of by what's the name of that town? Grove. And there was still fescue growing there, and so
there's microclimates everywhere, and like in small pockets of where you'd have the conditions where you could actually grow it, even if it doesn't really grow very well in your area. If you happen to have whatever cooler, wetter, whatever it is, but just sort of generally is what we were talking about with the Fescue Belt, broad strokes.
A lease is 10% of what a mortgage would be in most places. So you're paying 10% of what you'd pay for if you had a loan. Oh no, we already said that. Guess I'll have to do more research. I thought the blue stem had better winter grazing quality than that. Thanks. The sort, I don't know if there's some annuals that you can plant that do well in the winter.
That have winter feed capability, but our big blue stem,
big blue and the Indian grass just doesn't.
Yeah, it just dies.
Really, the only thing that holds up in the winter is the fescue. That's the only thing that.
And what's interesting
green.
What's interesting though that I've talked to Greg about is okay, well, if you've got just fescue available in the wintertime, aren't you going to have protein intake problems with your cattle? As in, they're going to be limited on protein and getting too much carbohydrate, which is never a good thing. And he was like, well, the way that you get protein in their diet essentially is there is protein in the fescue. It's not just pure carbohydrate, but it's too low. If they were on a pure fescue diet, they'd be stacking, their manure pats would be stacking up really high. And it's just not good for performance for them to not have any protein. And so, obviously, if you're unrolling hay and you've got some legumes in that hay, that's gonna help with their protein. But then the other thing is if you have properly stockpiled fescue, it can insulate plants that are not necessarily as cold tolerant. So Greg says I've seen in March, I've pulled back some really good quality stockpiled fescue, pulled it back pulled it back with snow and ice on top of it, and there'll be still some clover like alive underneath the fescue.
I bet that bottom on docks has clover still in it.
Yeah. So it's one of those things where like if you're managing height properly in the fall when you're building that stockpile, if you can get a really good, and sometimes you can't because you don't get rain properly, but if you can get a really good tall like stand of fescue with like lots of leaf material, it's gonna help insulate some other plants, and you might be able to sort of have these little like refugees of plants that might not necessarily be cold tolerant on their own that it's sort of protecting. So I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah.
But
here's a good one. When does fescue toxicity have a higher likelihood? So with the fescue toxicity, there's in the springtime, obviously when the spring flush hits and everything puts on a seed head, there's some of that endophyte in the seed. Actually, a lot of the endophyte is in the seed head. And cattle aren't usually eating the seed heads of the grass, but if
it's the only thing they have available to eat, though, that's when you get problems.
That's when you're gonna have problems with it. Also, the bottom 2 to 3 inches of the fescue plant, from the ground up to 2 to 3 inches is where the highest concentration of the endophyte is located. So if you're forcing your cattle to graze it down to the roots, that's when you're really gonna see a lot of fescue foot and endophyte problems. Whereas if you're just taking the top third of the plant, there's not a lot of that endophyte in that top third, and so you're not going to see that much in the summertime. And then in the wintertime, once like I was saying earlier, once you get some of that cold exposure, whether that's frost, snow, cold rain, that endophyte begins to kind of break down, and it becomes less and less as the winter goes on. And so as the winter goes on, that fescue actually becomes more and more palatable for the cattle and less toxic to the cattle. So that's kind of an interesting thing.
So managing height
and the fescue and the toxicity or the endophyte gives the fescue its hardiness in the wintertime. It's like Greg had explained it one time. It's like part of the...
Yeah, because what the endophyte actually is it's a fungus that's growing like inside the tissue of the plant. And so that fungus actually has a mutualistic relationship with the plant. Like it's giving the plant like certain compounds that the plant doesn't necessarily have access to. And the plant's getting in return, the fungus is getting in return some like a place to live and some compounds or whatever in exchange from the plant. And so it the fact that it's there makes the plant like healthier almost, like it gives it more of that resistance.
It's almost like an immune system for the fescue.
It just the fact that it's there makes it more hardy. There are low endophyte varieties of fescue that people have developed and bred, and they're nowhere near as hardy as the toxic variety. And if your cattle are used to it, so if you cull for it, when you start to see fescue toxicity, it usually shows up as cut off circulation to like the lower extremities, and so they get swollen hocks and they'll be like sort of limping. That's a sign of fescue toxicity. Usually if the cattle are sort of adapted to it, if they get it, they'll sort of get over that fescue toxicity in as little as a few days and as long as a couple weeks, but eventually they'll get over it. If they don't get over it and they start to have serious issues, you just get rid of the animal. And if you keep culling for that over time, you're going to end up with a herd that's actually adapted to that level of toxicity that you have in your pasture, and so it becomes less of a big deal. And then you just get a lot of benefits as a result. That toxicity factor, as long as you manage for height and as long as you manage your herd to deal with it, it's actually a great thing.
It is.
What do we got? We got about 5 more minutes.
Perfect. He's in Vancouver Island, so Seattle weather, rain. Yep. People say you can't have cows on the field in the winter. They'll pug it all up. Also,
it's true.
They say grass won't grow from November to March.
I don't know specifically about like what kind of forage varieties are growing on the island, but they're 100% right with like conventionally sized cattle. There's no conventionally sized, I guess it'd be conventionally sized cattle. Like if you're talking about 1,500 pounds, whatever,
Charolais cow.
Just, big. You gotta be big. You're gonna have a lot of meat on those cattle, like that kind of thing.
Get them big.
Get them big.
Put a lot of grain into them.
But if you've got large animals, like over 1,000-pound mature weight, of over 1,100-pound mature weight, you're gonna start to run into problems with pugging, and it's impossible. Like, you can't, without destroying your sod and destroying your farm, you can't have the cattle out in the wintertime, because especially there where you guys are, where it rains and rains and rains in the wintertime.
Another thing too is that, like we talked about earlier, the fescue sod.
Yep.
If you've got a grass that can put, when we're talking about sod, we're talking, it's like the root
it's
mass.
Like a mat. Yeah.
It's literally like, I don't know if you've ever been around fescue, but it's like, higher than the ground, like this much.
Yeah.
It's like
thick.
It's like walking on, like those like reeds that in the water that like big mounds.
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Like in swamps or whatever. It reminds me of that for whatever reason. But it's like
it trips you when you're walking around. Like if you tried to run, you'd probably fall on your face because unless you're picking your knees up.
Yeah.
Because it'll just catch your foot and you'll bite it.
And that root mass is what keeps the cattle up.
Yep.
Like, 'cause even like on this farm, there's places like where there's like solid clover where there wasn't a sod developed, and the cattle will absolutely tear up those places just because there's not that sod there to hold them up.
Yep.
That's a big one.
Yep. Yeah.
Howdy, fellas. Where are you located?
We're coming at you from Central Missouri. Rucker, Missouri.
Green Pastures Farm.
Home of Greg Judy, the legendary Greg Judy. Check out Greg Judy, Regenerative Rancher on YouTube if you
good plug.
If you don't know, already know. And Chewing the Cud, but it's gonna be hard to find because we only have like 40 subscribers.
I found it though.
You did?
Typed in Chewing the Cud and one of the videos came up.
There you go.
Look it up, folks.
Yeah. If not, go to On the Graze on Instagram and look at in my bio. There's a link.
While we're on the topic, go give me a follow over. At Isaac Tappenden. All one word, all lowercase.
Wow, that was just a series of shameless plugs.
There you go. You got to do it. You got to do it. That's all the questions we have right now. We're pretty. What are we looking at time?
Yeah,
we're pretty close to an hour.
Yeah, he got his book.
Awesome.
Both of his books, they're good. It's good stuff. It's good stuff. Those books are good.
They are. There may be another on the way. In fact,
wink, wink.
Yeah, wink, wink.
You heard it here.
What
do we got? You guys gotta get
mad at Working Cows podcast. I listened to the first one. It was good.
What is it?
The Working Cows podcast.
What is it?
It's like about
working
farming,
cows.
Working cows, like anything. The one I listened to was about, there was some like financial plan that this lady was like doing. I don't know. It was more based towards like big ag, like commodity. But
hey, power to you. You
it's
know what
good
I mean?
though.
Like
it had some really good like ideas of like, it really talked about how to make it financially sustainable. And not rely on the bank, not let the bank make your choices as to what you can invest in, because like the bank is looking short term, like in yearly gain, they want to make the money back that they lent out, whereas you as a farmer are looking long term, like to say that the bank wants you to buy this combine so that you can
I get what
you
you're
can
saying.
do it, like in the long term.
Yeah.
You're not gonna be able to pay those payments if the market tanks or whatever.
Yeah.
So it was good.
It's not like we don't have any like animosity towards like conventional.
Oh
ag.
no.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it's not like us versus them. You
right.
know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think it's just like
it's more of like we have a different way that we want to do it, and so like we're focused on what we're doing and I think like we're all on the same team, as in like we're all trying to produce food for people. And I've always said this, like there's some guy like back home, there's some guys I know, they're just absolutely awesome guys, and doing it the way commodity farming. I mean, they know so much. They're really intelligent guys, really great men, and like it's not like, you know, like you said, it's not like we're against that.
Yeah.
It's just
that we disagree with some of the practices.
Mm-hmm.
Just looking at you know, animal welfare, looking at environmental welfare, looking at financial welfare.
Yep.
Like there's just other ways of doing it. So yeah, I mean, it's not like us versus them. It's just that sector is doing it a certain way, and it's working for them to different degrees. But we would disagree with a lot of stuff. But that's all it is. It's disagreement. You know, it's not like we have animosity towards people. You know what I mean? Everyone's got to make a living.
Yep.
But it'd be nice if there was just more like back and forth, like understanding.
Right.
You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Because I feel like a lot of people in the regenerative space are like actually are like, you know,
going after.
Not going after, but like just like
angry
and closed-minded to people who are not in their bubble. Mm-hmm. Uh-oh.
No, it's mine.
It is?
I think it is.
You think?
Maybe.
No, I think we're still going.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's just me.
Sorry, I was just looking at his deal and it froze, and so I was worried. But
oh no, I can't see the comments because I just joined.
No, we're good.
It's all right.
Yeah, I think that about wraps it up. I think we've ranted and raved for long enough. It was a good session. We had a good group of people. We're here every Sunday night around 7:30 doing these discussions. Look towards the end of this week for clips from this episode going up on YouTube, and the full episode will be up on YouTube also towards the end of the week. Thanks for watching. We'll be back next week.
See you on down the road.
Same time, same place. I don't know what the topic is off the top of my head, but we'll keep it rolling. Yeah.
Thanks guys. It was a good live stream.
See ya.